Let's start with the legacy of Queen Elizabeth relative to her predecessors, George VI, but also Winston Churchill.
Well, I mean, she's the most sequential queen, sequential monarch there's certainly been probably ever in history, actually. I mean, certainly of the 20th century. And so today's been a very emotional day, I think, for not just people in Britain, but worldwide as well, because this really is the end of an era. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, there's a real sense of watching the pageantry, I mean, which has been peerless. I mean, nothing in my lifetime, nothing in, I think, most people's lifetimes, have we ever seen anything to compare to it in the streets of London. But what I think is so affecting about it is the absolute seriousness of it all. I mean, it was very much, today was a serious day, which suited her character and her personality, because the Queen was a serious figure for serious times. So I think that what we've seen is we've seen her being sent off in the best possible way that she could have been.
You know, just to build on that point, you talked about the pageantry. You've also talked about the economic realities for Great Britain right now. What do you make of that juxtaposition of the fact that when it comes to the future, the financial uncertainty, there are so many other issues that are on the table right now?
Well, I think that her death has left Britain a diminished country. I mean, obviously, Britain's in all sorts of difficulties at the moment, economically, socially, culturally. And I feel that the loss of the Queen has only exacerbated things, because there is a general feeling, I think, on social media today in Britain and possibly in other countries as well, that the Prime Minister Liz Truss is probably the weakest aspect of the funeral service, that her reading wasn't very good, that she doesn't seem to have the presence for the Prime Minister should have at times like this. And certainly, I mean, I think that in Britain now, there's a real tension between our status as a world power and what the Queen represented in terms of soft diplomacy. And I think that in terms of the market realities of it, it's hard to say there's going to be a direct correlation between possibly the pound strengthening against the dollar or even weakening against the dollar and what happened today. But I do feel that the world's eyes have been on Britain, and it's been fascinating to see how the event itself has gone. But what I think I'd be hesitant to do now is to say, is this a sign of a global rebirth for Britain? I'm not sure it is. Is this a sign of fatal decline? Again, it's too early to say, but it definitely is the end of an era.
Alexander, one of the criticisms of the monarchy is simply that it's an antiquated historical tradition or ritual of some sort. But Queen Elizabeth was known for many things over the years, including bringing access, television access, broadcast access to her coronation, to her life inside the palace with Princess Margaret, access to the palaces, which the public didn't have access to, as well as navigating things like divorce, for example, among her sister and among her children as well. Walk us through perhaps elements of modernity during her rule.
Well, I think over the last 70 years, that when she became queen after her father died younger than was expected, there was a real sense that the royal family were in trouble. There was a real sense that people weren't really sure about what it stood for. And what she was always very good at doing was understanding what public relations concerns were. She was very good at making her family seem like a more modern family. I mean, I think that towards the end of her life, she was disappointed by Prince Harry and disappointed by a lot of the controversies that he was involved in. And I think that obviously the fact that Prince Andrew, who was widely said to be her favourite son, was caught up in his own controversies, that would have obviously made her feel unhappy and disappointed on a personal level. But if you leave that aside, you can take her reign as a remarkable evolution, because what she understood was that for the royal family to not only survive the 20th and 21st centuries, but to prosper, as you say, there had to be a sense of greater transparency. There had to be a sense that sunlight was being let in on them. And of course, sometimes this worked better than other times. There was a documentary in 1969 about the royal family, which has never been repeated because it was felt to make them seem too banal. But her maxim was never complain, never explain. I think that did her remarkably well, because in an era that we're so used to people being very open, I mean, if you look at the Duchess of Sussex, somebody who both complains and explains constantly, we can see that there's something very different that happened with the Queen. And I do feel that what she did so successfully was to have such enormous affection, and that's a consistent feature of the tributes paid to her, that people felt as if they knew her. And I think that because of that, there's been a real sense of grief, I mean, far, far beyond what most public figures get, because there was an accessibility to her.